Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Herp Monday number 46 and we have an especially good one for you today. Today's Herp is a Herp that holds a special place in my heart. It's extremely unique. It's possibly one of the most unique snakes in the world, and I hope you enjoy this. Today we are going to be talking about the tentacled snake. So this tentacled snake, or scientific name Herpeton tentaculatum. Okay, so let me say that again. Herpeton tentaculatum. It is part of the family Homolopsidae. It is the Homolopsidae is a family of the Indo-Australian water snakes. So that probably gives you a pretty good idea of where these snakes are from. This snake, again, as the name implies, it can be found in your southeastern Asia, so Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. And these are a water snake, obviously. But something that's interesting about these is that these tentacled snakes can be found in freshwater, saltwater, and brackish water. So essentially all of the water. Now they do predominantly live in freshwater, from what I have found out, and they really seem to like murky waters, lakes, rice paddies, and very slow moving streams. They really like murky, dark, silted bottom. They do not seem to be able to live in very fast flowing water environments. Now, it's not exactly a large snake, but it is decent size. They average about 50 to 90 centimeters, which is about 20 to 35 inches in length. So they can get pretty big, but they're really more flat, not really thick body. I mean, they're pretty thick body, don't get me wrong. But these snakes, 36 inches would be an absolutely massive one. And they really come in two sort of color faces. This sort of striped, and then they have this blotch pattern. So this one looks to me like like it's trying to live with leaves and stuff. And then you have these kind of striped, and this one's more of a blotch as well, but they really have this dark gray, tan, brown. They're not really that colorful. If you can't tell from these pictures, it might be a little difficult to see, but they actually have very heavily keeled scales, meaning that their scales are really rough looking. Definitely have those ridges going down it. But that's not terribly uncommon, because as I said, this thing lives its entire life in water. It's not just, partially timed. This snake lives its entire life in water. And to help with that, remember when I said where these things live, that very murky water? What is this snake called? Well, tentacled snake. If you haven't guessed from the picture by now, it was named for these two tentacles on the end of its snout. I was going to put it off a little more, but that is what makes this snake extremely unique. Those tentacles at the front of its head, right next to its nostrils, really seem to serve some sort of mechanosensory organs, so they're detecting things in the water. They may actually be used to lure their prey as well, and we'll get into that as well. And also they have very, very small eyes. It looks like their eyes are large, but that's actually because they have a rather small head. When you look at the actual total length of this, you really only have a small head and very small eyes. Even here you can see that they got these those tentacles. They are mobile. They are not just stationary, but that's really what they're named for. But that's not really what makes this, that's not the only thing that makes this snake unique, and we'll get into that in a little bit. As with most water snakes, their diet does consist primarily of fish. I shouldn't have even said most water snakes. I believe most water snakes are going after frogs and amphibians more often than fish, but these seem to consist solely on fish. Well, there's some debate. I have found some conflicting research and says their diet is predominantly fish, and then some people say that it's solely fish. The predominantly fish people say that they also feed on frogs, amphibians, things like that. But I'm not sure. I do know that fish is their primary source of nutrition. And kind of on that, they are a venomous snake. They have extremely small fangs positioned way back deep in the rear of the mouth. They are one of those rear fanged snakes, as we talked about before. But that venom is actually very specific to the fish these snakes eat. So I wouldn't worry about this as a human. In fact, I do actually have a picture somewhere on my phone of when I was in college. We went to a zoo and we got to go backstage, and I have a picture of me holding a tentacled snake. And if the snake was in any way really dangerous to people, I doubt that the zookeepers would have let me hold this by myself. But it's extremely unique. Definitely one of the highlights of that trip. Also took a picture with an aquatic Sicilian, which is also a really cool animal. Now in terms of like length they can stay underwater, they can really stay underwater for about 30 minutes before they have to come up and take a breath of air. So they cannot just live all underwater. They do have to have an air pocket allowing them to come up for breath. They do have working lungs. No gills to speak of, but they can stay down for a very, very long time. As I said, they can't really move on land, and they don't really like to be picked up. And a lot of times if they're disturbed, they'll go completely rigid, kind of like one of the other snakes that we talked about. These snakes will just try and act like a branch. And you can imagine with a color pattern, maybe not like this, but with this color pattern right here, if it's perfectly rigid, it's going to look like a branch. Now, in dry seasons, there has been evidence where this snake will bury itself in the mud, kind of like the African lungfish that we talked about, estivating during dry seasons. It'll stay in that mud to keep its skin wet, but it will not actually... Sorry, a dog just jumped on the bed. They'll estivate in that mud. So, keeping themselves wet throughout this dry season until the next rains come. Something interesting about their reproduction is this is an ovoviparous species. Remember ovoviparous species. Sorry, I couldn't even talk right there. Those species have internal fertilization, and the eggs stay in the canal until they are nearly hatched or have hatched. So it almost gives the appearance that they're doing live birth, but they just retain the eggs inside of them. So that's really interesting, but nothing that we haven't talked before. But the interesting fact that we're going to end the video on is the fact that these are an ambush hunter. How these things hunt. They spend most of their time in that rigid posture that we was talking about. The tail is used as an anchor that while they stay rigid in sort of a J shape. We actually have like a little video here for you. This is by Scientific American, really thing. I am going to mute it, but you can see it hanging. This is just sort of like a children's illustration. It's hanging there, and as this fish comes close, let me pause right there. The strike zone is actually directly underneath the head. And throughout, because we have learned with high-speed cameras, we've actually seen what's going on with that. So if you can see this snake, that's an actual tentacled snake biting a small fish that they do. So you can see it happen right there. So what they're doing is a lot of fish go into have an escape reflex called a C start. We've talked about this before. It's when they're swimming along, and if something startles them, they bend their body in a C and then go whichever direction the head is pointing. So what's happening is that fish is anticipating the movement and will move its body right here to startle the fish. It actually just moves that. As it does that, it's bringing its head around as well. So that little movement on the back is actually causing that C-start escape reflex to start. And then normally a fish would just swim away. But what happens is this, because of how they're manipulating that C-start, they're actually swimming directly into the tentacled snake's mouth. So if we watch this again, see, we'll watch it again. See, it's going directly into that tentacled snake is actually anticipating the movement by tricking them to reflexively attempt to escape in the wrong direction, basically. And unlike most predators, they're not actually they're not going to where the fish was or where they're doing. They're actually predicting on where the fish is going to be and will actually adjust as the fish moves. It heads to where it believes the fish's head is going to be. And something else about that is the ability for them to predict the fish's movement seems to be completely innate. Young tentacled snakes actually seem to be able to do it. It's an incredibly well-developed predator-prey system that, to my knowledge, is actually incredibly unique. Using a fish's escape reflex completely against it and being able to predict it in not a learned skill, but a completely innate skill. So that to me is really cool. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If I don't, please be safe. Have a great day. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Please leave a comment on something that you'd like to see. I would love to do a request. But thank you so much again. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and peace.